Today, we're going to dig into some of the biggest challenges facing the world. And we're not just talking about news headlines. We're talking about problems that are fundamentally reshaping how countries and all of us interact with each other. The old rules just don't seem to apply anymore. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at this huge shift in global politics. Then, we'll dive into three key battlegrounds: the fight for people, the fight for the planet, and the new challenges to global security. And finally, we'll tie it all together to see what this means for our shared future. You know, for the longest time, politics was pretty simple. It was all about what happened inside your own country's borders. But that's just not the world we live in anymore. The biggest issues we face today, think climate change, pandemics, terrorism, they don't stop for a passport check. They cross every border, and that's forcing us to completely rethink how the world even works. Which brings us to the central question for this entire explainer. In a world where our problems are global, what do borders even mean anymore? Are they really the most important lines on the map, or are they becoming, well, a little bit obsolete? To really get a handle on this, there are two great models from international relations. The old school view is the billiard ball model. Picture countries as solid billiard balls on a table. They're separate, self-contained, and they just kind of knock into each other, competing for power. But today, the cobweb model makes a lot more sense. It's not just governments anymore. It's this messy, complicated web of companies, nonprofits, social movements, and people, all tangled up together. Everything is interdependent. So what does this new cobweb world actually look like in practice? Well, let's start with our first major theme: the fight for people. The well-being of individuals, their rights, their equality, is no longer just a local issue. It's become a major focus of global politics. And at the very core of this is the idea of human rights. These are basically standards meant to protect every single person, everywhere, from the worst kinds of abuse. They've kind of evolved in three stages or generations. The first generation is about your basic civil liberties, freedom of speech, that kind of thing. The second is about economic and social rights, like having access to education or healthcare. And now we're seeing a third generation emerge, things that affect us all, like the right to live in a clean environment. The big idea here is that some rights are just so fundamental, they're bigger than any single country's laws. A really crucial piece of this human rights puzzle is gender justice. And this isn't just about women's rights in isolation. It's about taking on the deep, systemic discrimination that holds back half the world's population. It's a recognition that you just can't have a stable or prosperous world if you don't have gender equality. It's as simple as that. This theme of interconnectedness is echoed by the Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen. His point is pretty stark. In this globalized world, trying to go it alone is a recipe for disaster. This quote really drives home the idea that being part of the global system isn't just an economic choice anymore. It's essential for improving people's lives and protecting their rights. And if you need proof of just how big this challenge is, just look at these numbers on gender justice. They're pretty staggering. Women do about 2/3 of all the work in the world, but they only get 1/10 of the income, and they own just 1/100th of the property. This isn't just unfair, it's a massive drain on the entire global economy and holds everyone back. Okay, so from the well-being of people, let's zoom out to the well-being of the planet itself. Because the threats to our environment are maybe the clearest example of a problem that no country, no matter how powerful, can possibly solve on its own. I mean, look at what we're up against. We're already seeing conflicts, actual wars break out over resources like water and oil. And climate change is what experts call a threat multiplier. It takes every other problem, like food shortages or political instability, and just makes it so much worse. These aren't abstract issues for the future. This is happening right now. So the world is trying to respond. At the big COP26 climate summit in Glasgow, the mission statement was incredibly simple and also incredibly difficult. Keep 1.5 degrees alive. That's the target that scientists say we have to hit to avoid the absolute worst, most catastrophic impacts of climate change. The stakes couldn't be higher. So how did it go? Well, it's a real mixed bag. On the plus side, they did strengthen the commitment to that 1.5-degree goal. And this was a big deal. It was the first time a climate deal ever directly mentioned phasing down coal. That's historic. But on the really critical stuff, like money to help developing countries adapt, or a fund to pay for the damage that's already happening, it was a huge letdown for many. It's a perfect snapshot of just how hard it is to get everyone to work together. All right, that brings us to our third and final theme, security. In the 21st century, what it means to be secure has totally changed. It's not just about tanks and armies crossing borders anymore. It's about new kinds of threats and new kinds of weapons that are changing the whole game. A huge part of this new security puzzle is the rise of groups that aren't states at all, like terrorist organizations. Terrorism totally messes with that old billiard ball model because it operates outside the normal state system. It deliberately goes after civilians, and its main weapon isn't really bombs. It's fear.
And the tactics just keep evolving. We're now facing the real possibility of things like bioterrorism, using diseases to create mass panic, or cyberterrorism, which could cripple a country's power grid, its hospitals, its entire economy, without a single shot ever being fired. This isn't science fiction. It's the new frontline.
Of course, the ultimate threat from states is still out there: nuclear weapons. The main tool the world has to keep that nightmare scenario at bay is the Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT. It's basically a grand bargain. Countries without nukes promise not to get them, and the countries that have them promise to work towards getting rid of them. It's the key pillar holding up global efforts to prevent a nuclear war. And this brings us right back full circle to that cobweb model. When you think about all these threats, terrorism, climate change, nuclear proliferation, you realize that nobody is an island. Every government, every company, every society is connected in this massive tangled web. A problem in one corner can destabilize the entire thing. So after looking at all these fights for people, for the planet, and for our own security, what does it all add up to? What kind of future are we looking at in this completely new global game? Well, the big takeaway is pretty clear, right? Global problems need global solutions. You can't separate human rights from planetary health, and you can't separate either of those from global security. It's all connected. We've officially moved out of that simple billiard ball world, and we're living deep inside this complex, messy, and totally interdependent cobweb. There's just no going back. And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to think about. For the last 400 years or so, the nation-state has been the main player on the world stage. But if our biggest, most dangerous threats simply ignore borders, is the nation-state, all by itself, really the right tool for the job anymore? That's the question that's going to define pretty much everything in the 21st century. Thanks for joining me.